Hello, and welcome to what will probably be the first of many videos as I kind of take you through the process of constructing this massive scenario that I wanted to do as a special for hitting 100 subscribers. Of course, now I'm over 150 and it's much belated and will probably won't be finished for quite a while. But I figure this way everyone gets to see my reasoning for why I make things the way they are, and keeps me honest and keeps me working on it. So today we're just gonna kind of get up to speed on where I'm at right now. You may have recalled a more fleshed out version of this in a previous update video from like 2 months ago, I think now. But I upgraded. There's been a database update since then, and I don't regret updating the scenario, well, quote unquote, updating it to the latest database. But in the process, it just wiped everything off the map, so it seems like it didn't update properly, which is fair. I made a lot of changes to a lot of units, so it might have just deleted everything I altered, which was almost everything. So just kind of starting back up, and just going to walk through what I got right now. And really, the most of what I have isn't anywhere close to being done. Pretty much only this line is done, and I gotta edit other things for that. So today, really, the focus is going to be on this Wisconsin-class guided missile battle cruiser. Now, I had a couple inspirations for this design, and actually, before I even go into that, the scenario as a whole. So for those that don't know by now, the idea that I want to make with this scenario is it's going to be near future alternate reality where we've got pretty much the same political divisions and diplomatic divisions that we do right now, but in a world where defense budgets were not constrained by the fall of the Soviet Union. And we're going to see tighter integration on both sides of the West and East. So, I have all these as part of the United Free Nations Alliance, kind of like, imagine it kind of like an outgrowth of NATO, where, you have NATO plus Australia, plus New Zealand, plus the Philippines, plus Japan. That wasn't the Philippines, that's over there. I circled Hawaii instead. But, kind of like a tighter integration, not quite to the level of EU, but more so than NATO. So there's, certainly a small level of political integration there, but a lot of, economic military integration, diplomatic integration, just so they can, be united. And of course, on the other side, we have we're gonna have the People's Empire of Greater Asia, which is basically going to be, Russia, China, probably Iran, North Korea, the usual suspects. Venezuela, not that they're at all relevant for this scenario. So, what this scenario is going to, and you can see I've done a very basic little bit of work here, but basically what this scenario is going to entail is there's going to be a my version of a modern rendition of the fast carrier task groups of World War II vintage. And they'll just pass through the Taiwan Strait, thinking they're in the clear. And then there's going to be a preemptive attack or a sneak attack, I guess, by, China and Russia, North Korea, aiming to take out this show of American might. And I think I'm going to try and involve two or three more other, I think just two more, fast carrier task forces. One that's like basically a European version of it, with France and Britain and Germany and Spain and Italy and all that. And then one that's going to be kind of a Southeast Asian version of it with South Korea, Japan, Australia, Taiwan, just to mix things up a little bit and have them posted somewhere around the American battle group. But obviously the focus is going to be on the American group, and there's going to be a lot of firepower in it. But likewise, pretty much, I'm probably going to utilize upwards of 80% of China and Russia's real-world anti-ship capabilities in order to try to take it out. And just, have lots of missiles and aircraft flying both ways and see who wins. And at first I thought this scenario was completely crazy, but then I saw an article recently, I'm going to post it here, which, by the way, if the video at all seems a bit slow or laggy, I have two 4K screens running, which is probably pretty taxing for my poor 1080, so if it seems slow, that's why. But yeah, so there was a month before the Berlin Wall fell, there was a huge exercise in the Pacific, PAX-89, and there were 54 vessels plus submarines, and you can see some pictures of it. And the core of this group, I mean, you can just see from this picture here, this is, I think that might be a Blue Ridge command ship, maybe. It's kind of hard to tell. It could also be an amphibious assault ship. Not a supply ship, though, surprisingly. I suppose those might be back here. Obviously, you got two super carriers here, the two battleships here. That looks like maybe a Virginia-class cruiser. You got a pair of Tychos here, the early variant with the standard missile launchers there, that as you can see. And then the rest of these are presumably various frigates and destroyers. I'm not as up on like middle Cold War ships. I'm more, 90s onward kind of guy, because that's just games I grew up with. We're all set in the 90s and later. But obviously it's just a massive fleet and somewhat reminiscent of the Fast Carrier Task Force. So the fact that, they can, hey, I was right. Blue Ridge, Long Beach, so I think I was wrong on that one. I knew it was a nuclear guided cruiser, but yeah, you could see a couple of Tychos there. But, oh, they even have a frickin' patch for it. Oh, they ended up having, looks like a Midway and a Kitty Hawk in there, too. Yep, Constellation and Midway. So, definitely somewhat reminiscent of the Fast Carrier Task Force, although I think they had total numbers somewhere. Yeah, 54 ships. Yeah. So, very massive, and we're not. The American core of this force that I'm making isn't going to get quite that big, but it's going to get pretty big. So there's going to be 4 super carriers at the core that are going to be of Gerald R. Ford type, probably a little bit enhanced over what we actually got, but both in terms of aircraft storage and in weapons and sensor subsystems. But so those are going to be the core, along with 4 supply class ships. So we got here I have that just as a placeholder right now. Again, mostly as a placeholder. Not entirely. I guess I did work on this guy a little bit, but looking at it now. But then, you're going to have an inner circle of these guided missile battle cruisers, which we'll get it to my inspiration for those a bit later. Kind of a mid-range circle of cruisers, an outer range circle of destroyers, and then a handful of submarines and frigates, for undersea protection. And the frigates are something that you could kind of detach. Well, I think I'll have them stationed as like close-in escorts for the carriers, but then they're also something that you can task these guys to kind of go, like, if there's something you need to send a ship, you can send these guys off without seriously affecting the integrity of the defense screen for the carriers. So we're gonna start this video, like I said, it's going to mostly be about this Wisconsin class guided nuclear missile battle cruiser. I think I messed that up. Nuclear guided missile battle cruiser, that's what it should be. And this has a couple of inspirations. One, obviously, is the Kirov-class battle cruisers of the Russian Navy, of which I think they have one in service and one undergoing overhaul right now. Yeah, fall of the Soviet Union wasn't kind to them. But there was a lot of talk back in the day of in the U.S. Navy of ships that kind of respond to that. One of those proposals was this CSGN strike cruiser concept, of which I'm just showing my personal favorite of the original concepts. There are a couple of them. And this would have had, I believe, an 8-inch gun up front. You can see the standard missile-style launching system there, capable of standard missiles and harpoons. You can see the support for Cam and Sea Sprite, I think that is. And then for ASW work, you got PESA radars, like what we end up having in the Tychos and the Burks. And then armored box launchers for Tomahawk cruise missiles. And obviously this is very reminiscent of the Tychos, but the main difference here is that they've got 2 whole extra weapon illuminators here for their standard missile system, it looks like. And the proposed displacement of this is somewhere, I think, in the range of 15 to 20,000 tons, which I think the Tychos displace. Let's check real quick, but I think they displace like around 12,000 tons. Not even 10,000, just a hair under 10,000 tons. And I know the Burks used to displace less than that, but they're coming up on that now. And in fact, I think some of the later variants might even be heavier. And my proposal is probably even heavier than that, maybe in the range of 30 to 40,000 tons, maybe. It ain't light, I tell you that much, and it ain't cheap. Probably costs as much as a carrier. Another concept here is we have a modified Virginia-class cruiser. This one, as you can see, is modified to kind of take in upgrades from the Tycho class. Looks like they show multiple Seahawks here, so it seems like provision for some sort of hangar or a larger pad that they can store on the pad. Still got fore and aft standard missile launchers, but you also have those reinforced with armored box launchers for Tomahawk missiles, as well as additional harpoon missile launchers for saturation attacks. Sea-Wiz, of course. You can see 4 missile directors again, it looks like. Again, I believe the Tychos and Burks only have 2 each. And then you got 5-inch guns, presumably fore and aft. So this was kind of an evolution of the strike cruiser concept. Another inspiration was kind of this cruiser baseline, and this was a proposal when they started pumping out Burke-class ships to kind of take the, because those were newer than the Tychos, and the idea was, let's take the tech we made for the Burks and apply it to the Tychos. And this is kind of what they came up with. Looks like 3 weapon directors, PESA radars, fore and aft Sea-Wiz. Looks like they've moved the harpoons forward. And then you still got your fore and aft 5-inch guns and fore and aft VLS cells. And it's a very nice looking ship, but obviously this never went anywhere. This is probably closer more to what we'd be expecting in terms of size for our ship. So this is Huntington Ingalls' proposal for a future surface combatant. I think this is kind of meant to be a multi-mission platform, but you can see this forward tower is probably close to what I would envision my battle cruisers having. I think I'd probably prefer a composite mast structure here, kind of over the antennas to reduce radar signature a bit. Kind of like what you see on European ships or the Flight 1 San Antonio class ships. And then here, you could see having like a 4-faced structure, where up here you could mount A and Spy 3 and 4 on each panel. And then down here, you could have early warning radars for ballistic missile defense. And it looks like they've got either a, like just from looking at this design, okay, so they have rolling airframe missiles there. Oh, and there, so fore and aft, various tertiary sensors or SATCOMs there. You got either like a long barrel 5-inch gun, or perhaps one of the 6-inch advanced gun systems of the Zumwalt up here. And then here you probably got something in the range of a 57mm 3-inch gun. And it looks like they have room for a bunch of Ospreys, probably part of the multi-mission thing, using this as kind of so you can use those to dispatch, special forces teams or something. And this is probably, like, again, this is probably going to be very close conceptually to what I envision. And then these were still conventionally powered. And of course here you got a huge area for VLS cells for, all the usual VLS stuff. Now here is what it's based on in game. I guess, here, let me zoom in a little bit so folks at home can actually see what I'm talking about. And this is obviously very reminiscent of the Zumwalt. They were sort of part of the same program. You can see they have hangars for Seahawks, for ASW work, for and aft VLS cells. That might be an advanced gun system, or perhaps a housing for point defense systems, Phalanx, CRAM, or something. Otherwise, you got these large hull areas that you can use for ACER, PACER radars. And conceptually, I kind of see my nuclear battlecruiser here, my Wisconsin class, as being kind of a mix, like a larger version of this, integrating some of the capabilities of this. And it is a very large ship. And then here is another, this is an early version for a sea-based anti-ballistic missile system, which again, that's kind of the role of these battle cruisers, is they serve as, kind of the command center for a carrier battle group's anti-air defense warfare, or just self-defense warfare in general. But they also serve as the flagships of anti-ballistic missile fleets, that are stationed around to protect, the coastline or allied nations from ballistic missiles. And this is an early, as you can see here, it's early 70s, late 60s. But Huntington and Ingalls, proposed a variant of this for ballistic missile defense. So just imagine this dressed up as this kind of, it's basically what it was. Here you can see they have the big ballistic missile tracking radar arrays that probably were PACER technology. It looks like some Sea Sparrow missile launchers for self-defense, a helicopter for close-in ASW, and then they have all of the middle of the ship devoted to interceptors for anti-ballistic missile work. And obviously this and this would displace probably in the range of 20,000 tons, I would imagine. And then this is kind of the other thing. So it's really, I guess really it's a combination of this, and this. This is a Navy concept for an arsenal ship, and this was, they even gave it the designation BBG for proposed design that ended up never being built. But this is basically kind of a, see, this is kind of similar to what I would envision my ship looking like. But this is a 1995 depiction. Basically, this was more or less a remotely operated ship that just had 512 VLS cells filled with Tomahawk cruise missiles or whatever missile the fleet would need. There's a skeleton crew on board to maintain the systems and stuff. They have a hull down pad for supplies, but no integrated hangar. And there are no onboard sensors for the most part. It was just, they would get the command to fire, they would fire, and then whatever ship asked for the missile would take over control of guiding it to its target. So, and you can see, if you want to read it, some of the information here. And that this multi-mission combatant I mentioned had 288 VLS cells here, as you can see mentioned here. And even China's kind of working on the concept again. So, now getting back to what I have in-game, so keeping all that in mind. What I have here is, because of the limitations of the game, I am basing this on the CG21 design, because I can't, the database is restricted. You can edit entities to a limited degree in the scenario. For those who don't know, so like I can add weapons, magazines, sensors. If I go into text files, I can add data links through a bit of a convoluted process there. But beyond that, I can't change anything, which is annoying at times. But so that's why I'm working from the CG21 as a baseline, because they do have an Arsenal ship in here too. But and really what ended up making my decision was radar performance. This was, as you can see, not quite as stealthy as the CG21, but also just aviation facilities, since CG21 actually had a hangar. So it basically lets me put in helicopters. Personally, on a ship that big, I'd just say hell with it and have a hangar for 4 helicopters at that point, as opposed to 2. But whatever. And unfortunately, I can't change the propulsion, the nuclear, or anything like that. But I get the speed I need, and this is going to be a relatively short duration scenario, so we probably won't see ourselves having to refuel during this. But so this is kind of what the baseline CG21 is. You got AN Spy 3 and 4 radars, an IR package, some basic sonar, and then an advanced gun system, your usual torpedo mounts for close-in anti-surface warfare, Nixie, usual countermeasures, a pair of 57mm Bofors, and also 2 sets of 4 sets, it looks like, of Mark 57 peripheral VLS cells, and each set is 64 for a total load of 256 missiles, which is good. And so I basically took that and used that as my baseline. So sensor fit, you can see here we're reusing the AN Spy 3 and 4 radars, because they do have some unique capabilities over the AN Spy 6. And the ranges are more or less equivalent, so they really were quite advanced for their time. And I guess some of the early versions might have been a little buggy, but cost cuts tend to do that. We have a full suite of ECM and ESM here, using the latest Navy Surface Combatant ESM and ECM systems. We retain the CG DD21 IR system, but that's supplemented with, you'll notice a lot of repeat entries here, because each one, like this radar, for example, only has like a 90-degree view, so you pair it with the other ones to get the full 360-degree coverage. These Mark 46 systems are similar to what the Burke has to guide, I believe, the Tycho 2 to guide their main guns. And this is used, maybe I should have gone over weapons first, but that's used mainly to guide the, so obviously first we have 8 Mark 57 PVLS groupings, blocks, I guess we'll call them, with 64 cells per block. So that brings a total of 512 missiles, which, yes, that's a fuck ton. One of these ships has about as much VLS-based firepower as a current U.S. carrier battle group, which is, or more even, which is really something to think about. To make things kind of easier, I have a universal loadout for these cells. Obviously, you can mix and match, but for me, this just seemed to be a reasonable multi-mission loadout. So each block will have 8 multi-mission Tomahawks that are capable of attacking both land and sea targets, with an additional 4 long-range anti-ship missiles that are shorter range than the Tomahawks, but they're a bit stealthy, they're more advanced, and they can attack, and they're optimized for the anti-shipping mission. So you can use these for saturation. Remember, multiply all these values by 8 for how many are on just the ship alone. We have 4 of the SM-3 anti-ballistic missile defense interceptors. Latest version, at least as of this database. I probably won't update the database anymore since that seems to just delete my scenario. So unfortunately, this is what I got to work with, and they're, even just like reading last week, they've made quite a few advancements. 16 enhanced Sea Sparrow missiles for point defense. They're quad packed, 4 missiles to a VLS cell, so it only takes up 4 cells. We got 4 RUM 139C. These are basically torpedo rockets. So it's a rocket, it'll carry a torpedo to a designated point and then drop it in the water to give it kind of a standoff anti-submarine warfare capability. And then we have the last one here is 40 SM-6 Block 1B air defense missiles. So these are the latest version. I believe these might even be the ones capable of hypersonics. Might be Block 2B. Let's see. Cruise altitude, climb rate. I'm sure it's right in front of me. Oh, here it is, down here. Yeah, so these guys can go just about the Mach 5, it looks like. And I think what I've read is supposedly they're capable of going up to Mach 6. So this gives definitely some hypersonic, anti-hypersonic capability. Do not use weapon in self-defense. That's interesting. I suppose they want to reserve that for the SM-3, but Block 2A, which is the latest. Do not use weapon in self-defense. Interesting. Certainly, like, for this stuff I would understand, and even the satellite, but guided weapon ballistic, I would use it in self-defense. But, so yeah. So that's our standard loadout that I apply to every VLS block in the fleet. Let's have a compelling reason not to. For self-defense, we have, just starting from our point defense systems, I have a pair of CRAMs, 1 fore, 1 aft, much like we saw in the multi-mission combatant. That's paired with a Helios laser weapon system, fore and aft again, as well as Phalanx fore and aft again. And each set provides 360-degree coverage, so we have multiple inner layers of defense against, ballistic missiles. Actually, I'm kind of curious if this can... I feel like... Yeah, so the lasers won't work on ballistic missiles, and that's fair, because... ballistic missiles have to be made to withstand the heat of re-entry, which is really fucking hot. So the laser would have to burn way hotter than that to actually destroy the missile, which is pretty difficult to do. Even but it will be effective against standard subsonic missiles and aircraft, maybe hypersonics, but I wouldn't hold my hopes up. And likewise, the CRAM, that's basically, for those that don't know, it's just a rolling airframe missile, 11-cell launcher, paired with a the Phalanx radar system and Yoda system, which is really old at this point. I actually saw an article recently on South Korea. They're designing their Phalanx, or their CWIS 2 system right now. Very interesting. I know what I wish I could have with this, but it's basically they're updating the radars to use ASA, a 4-sided ASA array, so that way you don't have the old Doppler type radars, and then it's obviously got its own electro-optical infrared imaging system, and that's paired with the 30mm cannon from an A-10 Warthog, which is hella great stopping power. Actually, just looking at the publicly available stats, the fire rate is only a little bit slower than the Phalanx, for range that's a lot further out with a lot more hitting power. So honestly, if I felt I could confidently retool the Phalanx in the database or in the scenario for that, I'd probably swap it out for something like that. But there can be a lot of dependencies on certain sensors, so I don't feel confident in switching it out. And performance-wise, it probably wouldn't make that big a difference in this scenario, so that's why I'm just kind of leaving it for now. But so past basic self-defense, we also have 4 Bushmasters located kind of on the corners of the ship to provide close-in defense against, speedboats, patrol boats, pirate boats, that kind of thing, swarm tactics. Which you can see the sensors for here, these top light turrets, IR, EO, laser rangefinder sensor groupings. And that's kind of incorporated with the mount. So actually, when you add this weapon, these sensors get added automatically, which is really nice. Makes things a lot easier. Then we have a large array of 50 caliber machine guns, again, for anti-swarm tactics. Just kind of, we learned our lesson from the Cole kind of thing. So these are placed around the ship, or you could argue, they just have the mounts for them placed around the ship, and if there's a swarm, they run out, they carry a machine gun from inside the ship, mount it up real quick, and start shooting. They don't necessarily have to be deployed at all times. And then the centerpiece, well, before we get to the centerpiece of our ballistic arsenal here, we have 4 57mm Bofors cannons, like what's on the LCS. And that's what we saw in the CG-21, had 2 of these. I decided to change these again, kind of put these at the corners, 4 corners of the ship to provide 360-degree protection. Kind of just an inner layer of defense against missiles and stuff before you actually get to, like, the real close-in stuff, like the Phalanx. And these are guided, I believe. Yep, these are also guided by Mark 46 weapon systems. I gave each gun their own director just so they could all fire at different targets independently. I don't know if they'd actually do that or just have one director fore and aft and focus their fire. But at least the option is there. Excuse me for a second. There we go. I'm not feeling as congested now. I always get a little congested when I talk for long periods of time. But, and again, everything here, the point of everything here is that this is just like an upscaling of the CG-21 design into a battlecruiser, essentially. So, and then to cap off, and again, also with these Bofors cannons, in addition to providing close-in air defense, that's another element of anti-swarm defense, as this, while it's not quite as far as a 5-inch gun, it does give you an extended range over the 25mm Bushmasters or the Phalanx weapon system, or especially the 50 cals in engaging small surface boats that might attempt close-in rocket or torpedo attacks that, you might see Iran or North Korea trying to use. And then to cap off our ballistic arsenal here, we have 3, if I can find them. If I can find them. Yeah, there. We have 3 155 advanced gun systems with hypervelocity projectiles. Now, obviously, the news came out recently that this... so these are basically railguns. You can see they have quite the range, 70 nautical miles for a 6-inch gun system. That's pretty impressive. They also have an Aegis data link in them, so they can be guided to a certain degree, at least against ground targets. Excuse me. Or retask. We can see weapon authorizations, guided weapons, aircraft, helicopters, ships, land. So, not useful against ballistics. I think these are like just short of actual railguns. I don't think they put real railguns in here. At least not in the consumer version. Maybe the professional version has them. But they do have the hypervelocity projectiles, which will give them an edge. And to kind of evoke the battleships of old, as well as the original plan for the Zoom Waltz even. I have 3 of these set up. 2 fore, 1 aft. Just single gun mounts. We're not going to go crazy and have 3 triple mounts here or anything like that. Because obviously their utility isn't worth the weight that would entail. Not to mention trying to stealth all that. As again, I do envision this to be a quote-unquote stealth design. Obviously, something this big is going to be hard to find, but you can at least make it so it doesn't pop up on your screen from a billion miles away. So then, as far as sensor fitting goes, all these Mark 46 sensor groupings are just basically gun directors for everything 57mm and higher on the ship. We have a bunch of these AMVPS2 and Phalanx EOSS systems. Those are for the self-defense systems to kind of provide their own tracking information so they can act autonomously. So we see that in the CRAM, the Phalanx, the Helios systems. Top plate turrets, like I explained earlier, are for the 25 mils. And then I think what are the sea lights for? Maybe the sea lights are for but then what with the top plates? Yeah, I'm a little confused there, but I guess I'll have to look into that a bit more. Because the sea lights, I would think, would also be kind of for the 25 mils, but I gotta see which ones were actually added. So, just kind of moving on. As far as decoys go, we obviously have our standard pair of triple torpedo tubes for close-in, point defense against ASW threats. We have a reinforced countermeasure loadout of torpedo decoys, a pair of Nixies, which actually these aren't the conventional Nixie, but rather this is kind of a low weight or a lightweight variant made for the Constellation class, and I think for the LCS as well. But at least stat-wise, it's just as effective as the standard Nixie. So it's like, well, hey, there's some easy weight savings, and technically it's a couple decades more advanced. So, yeah, torpedo decoys, Nixies. Where is it? We obviously have these Mark 59 floating decoy systems, and then I have Nolkas. There we go, Nolkas in here as well to provide, all sorts of shit that can throw out. And on top of that, I have the 171mm counter torpedoes. And these were something that they were tested on the I want to say they were tested on the Bush originally. And I've heard mixed things. Like, I heard the program's canceled, but then I see in here they're being added on to like the Enterprise and Doris Miller, so maybe it was successful after all. But these are basically just a small torpedo whose goal is to seek out and destroy an incoming torpedo. Obviously, we can see it's a very low probability of hit, but better than nothing, I guess. And see its effective range is really only 4 nautical miles. So I'm kind of curious to see how these end up working out. But in my own mind, I had, okay, we'll have 2 full batteries for obviously capital ships like the battle cruisers and the carriers, 1 full battery for cruisers, and then maybe like 2 half batteries or 2 quarter batteries for like destroyers. Adding up to a half battery. So I think I have these mounted to provide more or less total. Oh, here we can show arcs. So we can see, I think the game gives it a default 360 degree Excuse me 1 second. Okay. The YouTube's freaking throttling my background music, I guess. But so I'll have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, so this provides some somewhat reinforced anti-submarine warfare capability and provides them some hard kill measures over all the soft kill measures. Because I always like having alternatives. Now, as far as sensor fit goes, obviously AN Spy 3 and 4, the ESM we kind of covered already. Most of these gun directors we've covered. Passive, the standard passive total array sonar. They got a hull-mounted sonar, some Huff Duff, because why not? It's passive, doesn't hurt anyone to have that. Mine detector, and for navigation in shallows. Which this is really short range, by the way. It's like half a nautical mile or something. Obviously, we got the torpedo warning system that comes as part of the counter torpedoes. I do have an extra. I think I have an extra 2 AN Spy 3 radars, and what this is to simulate, and it's not really applicable to this scenario, but if we were packing SM-2 missiles, they're still even the latest versions still have semi-active radar homing. So they need a weapon director to constantly paint a target for them to hit, at least in terminal approach. And they have ANSPG 62s, I think, for the Burks and Tychos, of which they only have 2 or 3 per ship, which isn't great for saturation attacks. But the AN Spy 3 had the capability to basically, it could dedicate a couple of cells of its radar to forming a quote-unquote pencil beam to paint the target. And I don't know what the limitation is on how many that can do. We've obviously got 4 full arrays here, but, obviously that's going to degrade sensor performance, too, for guiding other weapons if you're not using all your arrays for something. So to kind of simulate a ASA version, the ANSPG-62, I have 2, and what I did here is I gave them full 360-degree coverage instead of making 4 separate ones, because that seemed overkill. But I did have 2, I believe, AN Spy 3s added in as extra to kind of simulate that additional weapon director if we were using SM2s, but we aren't, so that's probably be removed. But again, as far as the scenario goes, it's not hurting anyone. It's not like it measures power consumption or displacement for any of this shit, which is why I would want this to be nuclear powered, because oh boy, this is a lot of electricity right here. Likewise, if we go back to this concept, similar to how I envision like you have an AN Spy 3 and 4 paired up on this upper panel with large like anti-ballistic missile radars down here. I did mount the Cobra King X and S band ballistic missile tracking radar, and that's actually, if we go here, this is Cobra Judy, but that's basically what this guy is, a missile instrumentation ship. So he's got one of these are an X band and one's an S band, and this is what they use for tracking missiles on like an instrumentation range, but it's all ASA. So, and while I can't edit the database, but I imagine these is kind of like a cut down version you could use for ballistic missile early warning, which of course would be useful in the role of a anti-ballistic missile flagship, or the flagship of an anti-ballistic missile surface group, but also for satellite tracking too, potentially, since the SM-3s are capable of anti-satellite work. And I think that about covers it. Bridgemaster EATA is just a modern basic surface navigation radar. You see the Furma, I can't think of the name right now, but Furuno It's kind of like the Furuno class of radars that you see in some older ships. And yeah, so comes because I can't add hangers or anything. It comes with a pair of Seahawks. I'm editing those right now. I have these out for editing, and then I'm gonna tuck them in there. Not going to do too much, mainly just updating the data links, because that's the other thing I'm doing. Is since this is future alternate reality, I can do what I want. I'm giving everything an expanded data link set, because actually that was something that kind of confused me. Is if we go back into the database a little bit, we see CG21, that we're using for the base of most of our stuff. That's a lot of the usual stuff. AG's command data link, LAMPS 3, Tomahawk command data links, VHF and UHF radios, Flatcom or Satcom transceiver, fair. But all we have is this Link 16 mids data link. But if you look at any major surface combatant of ours, in this case, we'll take the Ford. They have a completely different set of data links. Like, they have, secure and unsecure HF and UHF, and honestly, I mean, I could add the unsecure stuff. There's certainly some utility for that, but not for what I'm doing in this scenario. But you see, they have, Link 11, Link 14, Link 4A, which those are data links with different purposes. Like, I know at least one's a maritime data link. I think one might be for communicating with ground forces, but no Link 16. And I think Link 16 is kind of the future with, the cooperative engagement capability and all that, especially if they can make it like a secure platform for stealth aircraft. So that's the other thing I'm doing too, is I'm giving at least all the ships the same data links, and then all aerial platforms will at least have the Link 16. So it doesn't show up in sensors or weapons, and this is why I have to go into text files to edit, which is going to be a bit of a pain. But if we go here in damage control, we can see the data links I've added is accidentally added this one. I don't think I'm probably going to just settle on. I gotta look up the difference between these two, but probably settle on one or the other as a primary data link. But you can see I also added the Link 4A, Link 11, and Link 14, so that way it can communicate with, have more communication with the rest of its fleet, which if you're trying to command the air defense of a carrier during a saturation attack, I think you want as many channels of communication as possible. Leave Link 16 for, cooperative engagement scenarios, which, to be fair, it does have a decent amount of channels. If we just go back to CG21 here, I think it's got like 255 channels on it. Yeah, so that's a decent amount of channels, but I still want to, if there's communication that needs to happen besides that, let's try to keep it off the CEC enabled channels. So then, as far as naming conventions go, because this is, again, fictional alternate reality, I can make them whatever the hell I want. So for these guys, I reinstated the World War II convention of naming battleships after states. I know these are battle cruisers, but still. So we have the Wisconsin class, and we could even call this the Midwest subclass, but we got the Wisconsin, the Ohio, the Minnesota, Michigan, the Iowa, and the Illinois. Now the carriers, I'm going to, I haven't really done any work on the carrier yet. I'm using the Doris Miller as a template just because that's most advanced in the database, but I'll be changing it up. Enterprise is obviously going to be one. The others are probably going to name for famous battles like the carriers of old. So, Ticonderoga, maybe like, Ticonderoga, Kitty Hawk, and Valley Forge, or something to that effect. Obviously names TBD. Supply ships, I gotta come up with a naming convention for those. Excuse me. I can actually delve into the supply ship a little bit. So sensor wise, I didn't really touch it much. I just added 3-panel Enterprise Air Surveillance Radar Spy 6, like that's on the a lot of our they're adding it to the America class. I think it's going to be on the a variant of it is going to be on the Constellation class frigates. I thought they might have been adding it to the Flight 2 San Antonios, but I could be mistaken on that front. And then obviously all the carriers are going to have it. It's just a cut down Spy 6, so I just use that to replace kind of the other radars that it used to have for just for like situational awareness. Obviously, it's not going to be directed weapons for the most part with this. And then I just put fore and aft self-defense systems, so Phalanx, Helios, CRAM. It's got, a somewhat reinforced countermeasure system, one anti-torpedo countermeasure system, because, I mean, granted, actually, just remove that, because we have this, standardize on that a bit. Obviously, it's got some Bushmasters for close and 50 cals for close-in work. Obviously, and then that was the other thing I did, is I replaced, I might have to reinforce that a little bit, but I replaced the standard, what are they, like Mark 8 Sea Sparrow launchers, I think, or something like that. I replaced that with 8-cell Mark 41 VLS. I might reinforce that to 2 8-cell VLS. No, you know what? I won't, because that 8 cells gives you 32 enhanced Sea Sparrow missiles, so. And it should have and with the Enterprise Air Surveillance Radar, it should be more than capable of directing those against anything. Obviously, this isn't a major surface combatant, but I'm also not going to buy into the bullshit of the Navy having civilians man the replenishment ships. That's something that I never quite like, because it's like, oh, they're civilian man, so we'll pull all the weapons off, and obviously no one will ever attack them. Which, yeah, let's see how that works out in a near-peer conflict, but I feel like that won't fly. But it does have a large hangar, so on top of this, I don't think I've changed the data links yet for this. Yeah, these have very basic comms, so I haven't modified the data links for that yet. I'm going to have to do that later. But then it does have quite the hangar on it. If we go into the entry for it, we can see where is it? Here we go. It's got a hangar capable of fitting 3 aircraft, which is better than even cruisers, as well as a pad. So what I did was, what we're going to have is probably have one CMV-22 Osprey, just like the carrier onboard delivery variant. I figure, we can have one of those on there for, haul down operations and stuff, as well as a pair of Nighthawks for, smaller, tighter spaces. So, these guys can kind of, hub and spoke, this way the supply ships, like with the Osprey, the Navy wanted to make a hub and spoke system where you could fly stuff out to the carrier and have these same aircraft go from the carrier to kind of resupply everyone. And with the Osprey, well, we can make the supply ships hubs as well that spokes can come out of. So we'll see how that works in here. I don't think we'll have to do any replenishment operations like that, but it does give us some added capability. So obviously this isn't probably strictly possible with the AoE 6 type hulls, but again, near future, this can be whatever the hell I want. But honestly, I don't think it would take that much bigger of a hull to accommodate a single Osprey if the hangar's already rated for 3 Seahawks, or Nighthawks as the case is. Obviously, I have these out for editing. As far as the carrier itself, I do plan on having the massive air groups that were in the original update video, but I've got to edit them. So right now I just have the base versions of them here. Probably, I don't know. We'll see what I'm in the mood for in the next video. Then the Romeo Seahawk for ASW work and pilot. I think that. I forget if it was the Romeos or Nighthawks that are now used for like playing guard and pilot rescue, but I think one of these are. I thought I saw it somewhere. Oh, mission types. It's going to be under mission types, which are where again? Oh, they're in the actual aircraft screen on the carrier, so yeah, I guess we'll figure that out later, which is which. Now, unfortunately, the problem with the CG-21 is I can't get, like, cranes and stuff for boats, which I would obviously prefer to have for, maybe not so much mine-sweeping, but certainly for things like, you know, if it's on a piracy patrol. Granted, this would be a hell of a waste of money to send on a simple piracy patrol, but just, like, maybe some remotely operated unmanned surface vessels to provide, you know, kind of your own counter swarm or something. I would have loved to have added that. Unfortunately, cruisers apparently don't come with little boats, but so we don't have those on the CG-21 either, which CG-21 is basically just going to be one of these guys cut in half, but we'll go through the creation of that next time. But the Zumwalts can carry boats, or at least I'm using the Zumwalt as a basis for my DD-21 type design. So I have an 11-meter R-hip here. I think I just wanted to put night vision goggles on it or something. No, it's got those. I don't know. I wanted to do something to it before I actually plugged it in. Not put Link 16 on it. Nothing that crazy. I don't foresee this being like a target designator or anything. I know I wanted to do something to it just for, you know, reinforce it a bit for anti-piracy missions, because that is obviously something you would send a destroyer and again, this is basically going to be a CG-21 cut in half. So, you know, what the cruiser will have 4 aft gun systems. This will probably only have a 4 advanced gun system and an aft 57 mil. You know, so we can kind of scale down cost and displacement. Which, excuse me again. Remember, I think the Zumwalts display something around 14,000 tons. Which is more than our cruisers right now. Yeah, 16,000 tons. Look at that. If I can drag this over here. And it's got significantly less armament. So you figure the destroyers I'm envisioning here, which, I mean, ideally they'd be nuclear powered too. But in this world of unlimited money and resources, but you figure these guys are probably going to be about 20,000 tons. You know, with the way I have them outfitted, these cruisers are probably going to be 25 to 30 easy. And yeah, I could see these getting up to 40 or even 50,000 tons. Which, for reference, the San Antonio class that is the basis for that multi-mission surface combatant is currently, the Flight 1s at least, which are like the heavy versions, are 25,000 tons full load. And I believe the America class is around 45,000 tons, which is roughly the same displacement as the Midway class that came right after World War II. So these are big, fucking, heavy, expensive ships, if you'll pardon my language. But yeah, these were the composite masts too that I was kind of talking about, where like they have that. They do have a conventional sensor mast in here, but then it's enclosed in this composite material that makes it easy for your radar to work, but that kind of reflects anything that's not your radar to make it, or not reflects, but disperses, I guess might be the better word, anything that's not your radar system, so that way you're harder to detect. And it works fairly decently too. Actually, the Frem frigates that the Constellation is derived from have composite masts, I believe. But because we mass produce our shit, we tend to take the easy cost-cutting corners, which means not having composite mast enclosures. But So yeah, expect this. This is going to have, just like it says on the tin, 4 blocks of the PVLSLs. Which, just to briefly get into that as I kind of wrap up this video, the Mark 57 peripheral vertical launch cell is very similar to the Mark 41s that are familiar to everyone from the Tychos and Burks. I believe they have a slightly larger depth than the Mark 41, but their biggest improvements is that, one, they're supposed to be mounted around the ship rather than in centralized magazines, kind of like with the Burks and Tychos. The idea this way, if you with our current ship, if a missile hits one of those VLS magazines, you're losing half your ship right there. That's gonna easily blow off your bow or your stern. So the idea is, if you kind of disperse them around the ship, obviously it's going to set off a few missiles, but hopefully not enough to just instantly incinerate your ship. And I imagine they have somewhat better armoring for that fact too. Well, not armoring per se, but they also allow for, I believe, up to 20% greater thrust or exhaust than Mark 41 cells, which this allows them to, even for a missile of the same dimensions, you can put a more powerful rocket motor in and not like burn out the cell or something, or burn through it. So that's why I'm using Mark 57 on everything, as it's kind of the more modern version. Unfortunately, we don't have any hypersonics modeled besides the SM3 and SM6, so its utility is limited, but it's something, That about sums it up, I think. I guess the only other thing here is I mentioned I was going to have a few frigates, which, getting back to naming schemes, obviously, battle cruiser states. Cruisers are probably going to be named after cities, like in World War II again, so this will be, Cleveland or Milwaukee or Chicago or something. Well, destroyers, and these guys I'm going to name for, just people who've gotten medals of honor, or, otherwise highly decorated individuals, which is basically how we name our destroyers now anyways, and always have, if you even go back to World War II. And the same with the frigates, which would be analogous to the old destroyer escorts of World War II. You can see here I named this one Doris Miller to make up for the fact that I'm taking the Doris Miller away from the carrier. So, and then obviously I haven't done much here. There are expanded docking facilities on these well, okay, I'm not using the Constellation class frigate. Actually, what I'm using is what I envisioned would be the future frigate, and that's this General Dynamics multi-mission combatant, which is basically like if they had built the LCS the way it should have been built. Here you can see they have a pair of weapon directors for standard missiles. They have a 4-panel ASA radar, enough hangar facilities for a pair of Seahawks and a drone, harpoon launchers, and then I think they must have 16 or 20 cells on each side of the superstructure here. And they have a phalanx here, but I'm going to kind of build them out as it's going to be fortunately I don't have to deal with all the freaking technical issues that the LCSs have had to go through, like hull cracking or engine problems. I know that they keep breaking gears or something that disables their engines, but this way we get a stealthier combatant. It's not going to be, I'm still debating between a 40 or 64 cell design. Probably moving closer to the 40. I haven't fully decided yet. I would have done a 32 and 16, but those variants of the Mark 57 don't exist. It's not quite as diverse as the Mark 41 is right now in the game, or simulator, whatever you want to call it. It only comes in Mark 40 cell and 64 cell variants, whereas the Mark, actually we could go in, and if we go to weapon and Mark, oh, you know what? Oh, that's a mount. So if we were to just here, yeah, BLS on on a 7-meter R-hib. Yep, that's real. But if we go to add mounts here, we can filter by VLS, and we can see, okay, we got some Russian, Israeli, Chinese here. Here we go, the Mark 41s. We can see there's Korean even. We got 16 cell variants, 24 cell variants, 29 cell variants, 32 cell variants, 40, 48, 61, and 64 cell variants, and then 8 cell variants. And actually, the Saudis ordered up their own LCS that they're building up in Marinette that basically is that multi-mission combatant, I believe. That's basically a lengthened... Because... Let me see if I can find the original... illustration, but it was advertised as, okay, you're buying these small LCSs for like low intensity stuff like Littoral ASW or submarine rescue, that kind of thing. But you could buy lengthened ones that would basically act as frigates. Let's see. There was a very nice chart I remember seeing that basically had 3 variants where you had the basic LCS. Here we go. So, looking at this is with the Freedom class. We might use the Independence class. Because actually, I was really turned off to these exotic hull types like the that you see on the Zumwalt and the Independence, but apparently it sounds like the Independence at least has been faring better than the Freedom class in terms of operational capability. But then the Zumwalts, there was an admiral recently on a Zumwalt, and they went through Sea State 6, I believe, and he's like, oh, it's the fucking smoothest ride I've ever been on. So apparently, everyone was concerned that those, what are they called, the tumbler home hulls, were going to be unstable in heavy seas, but apparently they ride even better than conventional warships. So that's what really pushed me towards that, was originally that concern. But here you can see, this is the basic LCS design that's really crammed in with a pair of harpoons bolted on top. I think this loses its multi-mission capability, but you get, 8 harpoon missiles, a couple extra Bushmasters, because I don't think those are default. They might be, I don't know. And then a 4-cell VLS up front. Still got the 57mm here. Now, with their medium pairing one, you get, they lengthen the hull a bit. You upgrade that 4 to an 8. But otherwise, there's not real... It looks like they do rework some of the engine there. But otherwise, you're still pretty tight on space, and it doesn't add a lot of capability. Now, with this design, you can see we've got an 8-cell up front, and that's... If these... I don't think those are VLSs. I'm not quite sure what to make of those. They might be VLSs, but just at a really bad angle. If they were, it'd probably be 64 cells up top. But then you can see they have some peripheral cells here, which these might be Mark 57s even. And you got 16 there, presumably 16 on the other side. 32 here is 40, which, is reasonable. That's kind of what I want to get for my frigate. You got the C-RAM in the rear. You got, this looks like either a satellite receiver, possibly a weapons director for standard missiles. So this one, and you got a reinforced superstructure here with larger ASA radars, probably Enterprise Air Surveillance Radar type stuff, the scaled down AN Spy 6. Got some engine changes here. They've upgraded the 57mm to a 3-inch gun. And this is basically what I'm seeking to emulate here. So I probably will omit the harpoon launchers, as I'd rather just... I think that's reasonable. Omit the harpoon launchers and have extra BLS cells. And then, of course, we're going to have a reinforced self-defense system. As I want... Well... I do want C-Rams and Phalanxes fore and aft, but... yeah, Kind of a tough one how I'd fit that on there. So this one might just be restricted to like a CRAM aft, a phalanx forward, and then a centrally mounted laser system that can operate almost 360 degrees just as weight savings. And obviously we still have room in the hangar for our 2 Seahawks and a drone or whatever it ends up being. But these guys do have expanded dock facilities too. Oh hey, you can see they have cutouts for this one was definitely more geared toward littoral ASW, as you can see the cutout there for the triple torpedoes. Actually, I think that's what that might be supposed to be too. Not entirely sure. And maybe this one has it, but it's kind of obscured by the radar of the middle variant. But getting back to this, we do have an expanded dock facility on here. So in the game, it's modeled, or in the scenario, it's modeled as, that's not what I want. Here we go. They have a davit and a remotely operated davit slash crane slash shelter, which I think is kind of coming in from the old package, modules that you could get with the LCS. So what I'm doing is I'm going to load it up with a mixture of fleet class combat unmanned surface vessels, which these are in a minesweeper role. That's all they added in the database was this, or a prototype that's more or less unarmed. I might throw a 50 cal on there, but that'd be about it in terms of like a counter swarm thing, because that's just not well developed yet, and maybe won't be. I think they have possibly other plans for anti-swarm tactics, but and certainly I think, at least as far as the scenario is concerned, the reinforced armament of the ship is going to be sufficient to fend off the swarm attacks that I'll put in, and then they'll have a small 7-meter RHIP for anti-piracy or visit board search and seizure, that kind of thing. And I leave the 11 meters to the cruisers so they can do a little bit more with that. And then, last but not least, I think the only thing I have yet to go over in any depth is we got the USS Wahoo here. So I'm going to follow World War II convention, named Submarines After Sea Life. And we're going to have about somewhere between 4 and 8 of these submarines traveling with our carrier battle group. And they're going to be a modified Virginia class. Basically, I'm taking what is, in my mind, the best of the Seawolf and Virginia classes and mixing them. So we're going to have all the advanced technology of the Virginia class here, but we're going to have, really the big thing is we're going to have the 8 torpedo tubes of the Seawolf, as well as 8 wire controls, and they're also going to have there's a I think it was the Moss torpedo decoy. I can't find anything quite the equivalent to that. If I do, I'll put that in there if there's like a more modern equivalent. But just seeing that thing in action in like cold waters, and how they'll go in, they'll launch like 7 torpedoes at a battle group, and then they'll launch one of those decoys, and then they'll just go and hide, and it's just fucking amazing. Obviously, in real life, it probably wouldn't work quite as well as that, but, it's an option. And then, as part of this is based off the Flight 5 Virginia, so they also have, obviously, integrated countermeasures. I'm probably going to put in a small suite of counter torpedoes. Nothing too big, but just kind of a last-ditch hard kill resort. And then, obviously, they have a pair of VLSs, which I'm probably going to, one of these, I'm probably going to replace this one with the multi-mission Tomahawk, and then this one is probably going to end up being, SM6, really? That sounds kind of stupid, but the smaller VLS is probably going to be for anti-ship work, so that way they have, a decent mix of capability, and you could certainly, get 2 or 3 of these guys together and saturate a couple of ships at least. So that about covers where I'm at with the the United Free Nations Alliance forces right now. Excuse me. And just to reiterate, this is not going to be certainly not a global, but even this isn't even going to necessarily be a theater level engagement to an extent, because obviously I could pull in all sorts of because I thought about this a lot, and like obviously there's a ton of bases and systems on like Taiwan and Okinawa, southern Japan, even northern Japan you could call stuff in from, and South Korea of course, that you could use to come to the aid, like additional fighters, maybe some land-based anti-ship missiles that you could use to kind of cut off the enemy. But then I reasoned if I included those, I would have to also attack those, and like it would quickly evolve into this whole theater combatant command, and it's like that's, and then you start calling in stuff from the Philippines or Guam, and it's like, okay, this is getting out of hand too quickly. So I'm going to try to stay somewhat narrow in scope. So like the basis is basically going to be on top of our attack. They're also attacking South Korea, Japan, Taiwan. So we're just seeing one small part of this war zone. So that's why I kind of place these outside the Taiwan Strait. Because inside the Taiwan Strait, I would have to include Taiwan. There's really no two ways about it. And this is kind of in a sweet spot where there's at least some open area that's within reach of China. But then, you could say these guys are dealing up here and these guys are dealing down there. South Korea is dealing in there, so, and there, that way we can kind of just focus on whatever battle groups we have here, and then make that be the focus. Certainly for the People's Empire of Greater Asia, it certainly is going to be a theater level attack. These are kind of the Eastern, Northern, and Northern Command Air Force bases for China. I just went and plopped down single unit airfields as markers. I'll probably flesh these out later. But eventually, I might even include some from their Southern Command from like Hong Kong and stuff, although I would think those would be mostly reserved for attacks on Taiwan and the Philippines and Guam. And even like this Northern and Eastern Command is going to be, they're going to kind of be doing double duty between Japan and South Korea. So even some of these, most of these will probably stay. But maybe I'll cut one or two of these out and cut out one or two of these to simulate, okay, these are the bases you have for attacking these forces. Obviously, I would setting up some opposing carrier battle groups. We got, I gave the Chinese a pair of Shandong Type 2s. They don't have Type 3s in the database, but I got some Type 1 Liaonings up there. I'll probably have each one headed by a Type 3. Excuse me for a second. I think YouTube was trying to throttle me again. But, so basically we're going to have two Chinese carrier battle groups kind of off the fast carrier task force type thing. But they're going to be divided into two groups coming from the north and south. And then we'll have the Russians. Actually, I might divide it into three groups and have the Type 3s come from the south to support move them around a bit. Have the Type 2s come up to support I don't know. I gotta play. I just want to focus on one side, so these are kind of just all placeholders right now. But then, yeah, we have Russia here with a pair of Kuznetsov type carriers. I might give them, I think it's a Varyag. Let's see here. Ship, hypothetical. I like how Vladivostok is hypothetical now. The Ulyansk or whatever the fuck, which is basically the Russian attempt to make a conventional cattle bar carrier. And then I'll simulate the Chinese Type 3 with probably either the medium or heavy cattle bar variants here, and just fit them out appropriately. And then build the battle groups out from around there. Eventually we'll get the North Koreans in and the Iranians in with some swarm fleets, but that'll be later more of a finishing touch. Give them some submarines too. So eventually what we'll see is full spectrum warfare below, on, and above the sea that I'm going to try to automate it too, and that's part of the reason why this is going to take so long. I can easily plop down a bunch of platforms, but making all the missions to automate it is a completely different thing, and that way I can hopefully record it and import it into TAC view here, so that way we get a nice 3D view of the battle, or at least as best as we can accomplish. You know, obviously it's not going to be as pretty as like Fleet Command, but you know, and yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to this. I certainly am looking forward to the amount of missiles that are going to be thrown about. And I think that's where we'll leave it off today. Next time we'll probably do some work on CG-21, and maybe a bit more depending on how ambitious I am. So with that, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for next time, and stay safe out there. And we'll see you next time.